Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hi, how you doing? Welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for stopping by. The Season 5 update included a lot of weapon changes, specifically to a lot of the main meta weapons. So you guys already know today we are back here on our full meta tier list featuring every single gun in the game. I've got my list of all the changes and everything that was updated when it comes to the weapon portion of the Season 5 update, and we are adjusting the list as necessary. So first things first here, we do have some new weapons. As always, disregard the extra amp. There's two of them on this list, and I don't know why I did that, but we've got the Ex1, we've got the RA225. You might say, Zach, there's also a third weapon. There is. That revolver thing is also there, but it has no attachments. It is mainly a melee weapon that just happens to shoot 6 revolver shots that are not really that good. So I don't think it really belongs on the list. Like, it's basically in the same place as the knife would be. Obviously, we don't have all the melee weapons here because that'd be pretty redundant. It's not anything good or worth using, so it'd be like in the niche category. Honestly, borderline garbage category. It's just not worth the time. But when it comes to the actual real new weapons, the Ex1 Laser Gun, I'm not gonna lie, to me, it's inviable. This thing, as we talked about earlier on today, I broke down setups for the Ex1 and the RA225. It just doesn't really feel that good in Warzone. I fully anticipate it's going to be buffed here soon so that they can promote it a little bit more with the battle pass and the bundle sales, but I mean, it just does not feel strong in any way. You shoot it at long range, there's some recoil that you got to go through, and the velocity feels a bit odd, and even if you break armor, it just feels like it gets a ton of hit markers for what it's worth. It just doesn't feel like it is a worthwhile weapon compared to a lot of the other normal guns that we have in the game, which surprises me, but it definitely is sitting inviable for me right now. The RA225, slightly more competitive. I'm gonna go ahead and throw this one into the competitive category, believe it or not. It's not the world's craziest SMG, but it certainly can get the job done. It has a great strafe build. We'll be covering that in our top 10 best loadouts. We're gonna be breaking down all the best loadouts tomorrow, so obviously stay tuned for that. And by the way, if you are new here or if you have not already subscribed, around 52% of viewers watching aren't subbed yet, and every day I got you covered with literally everything going on in COD, loadouts, news, updates, everything like that. So feel free to hit that sub button. But yeah, it's decent for what it is, but it's not the craziest gun in the world. I think its closest comp is like the well gun right now. So it's competitive for sure, but nothing too crazy. But then we get into the actual weapon changes here, starting first with the AS-44, which ended up getting a range buff, but it got a close range nerf for sort of that hybrid rifle and SMG loadout. So up close, it's not going to feel as strong as before. It still, in my opinion, is the most dominant sniper support and mid-range weapon in the game if you can control the recoil. I mean, yes, things like the Cooper and the Volk and the Nikita are good, but the AS-44's TTK is just unreal when you are able to consistently land shots in that 20 to 55 60 meter range, that mid-range area. The thing is just as dominant as it can be. So, and it got buffed there too with that damage range, right? So it's gonna still absolutely be a beast there, stays in top meta, but close range, not really gonna be worth using this as like a hybrid SMG. Now the bar got a magazine capacity buff on the Clouser rounds, I believe. That doesn't change it from being just a competitive rifle. The recoil is not the greatest, the fire rate's not the greatest. It's sort of there, usable for sure, like solid if you know what you're doing, but nothing crazy. Now the Cooper ended up getting a recoil nerf, basically. They also adjusted the compressed rounds a bit. I don't think that's enough to knock it out of the top meta category. It's still going to be super easy to use despite the slight recoil changes there. I mean, the thing is one of the most laser beam-esque weapons in the game outside of, I guess now, the Ex1, right? But it still is going to be very consistent for some close range and some sniper support. Longer range now, it still won't be super practical just like it wasn't before. So it's not really going to be meant for those fights all that much, so that recoil adjustment, not the biggest end of the world thing, if you will. This is one that makes me a bit sad. The KGM-40 got knocked down pretty significantly. It got a long range velocity and recoil nerf with this update. So the KGM-40 was already sort of struggling at long range. It was the #1 picked rifle because it was so easy to use that even though it had a pretty mediocre TTK past like 60 meters, players were able to land shots consistently with it and still have a realistic TTK that was very competitive. I think the KG now does drop down into competitive though. This is one of the more severe drops. I will say it's probably one of the most competitive rifles in this category, probably my top pick over things like the Bar, the Ram, the M4, the Kilo even, but it's not gonna be my #1 rifle anymore, my #1 medium to long range option because of these changes. Limiting its long range potential and nerfing that even more after it already was not the greatest is just gonna taken off that throne in a way that it really can't fight to get back up there, right? So KG definitely sees a pretty big drop down. Now, on the contrary, this is one that I love. The Grau, my favorite gun of all time, did get a buff to its range and its neck multiplier. Now, I'm gonna keep it 100 with you guys. It is not meta. It's just not. Anyone saying the Grau is meta, they're fooling you. I'm not gonna lie, because this thing, while it got a buff and that's super exciting, is not better than something like the STG or even things like the XM4, the Vargo, and the UGM. They're just not on the same level of competitive, right? If I want a good long range weapon, well, I'm gonna have a ton of fun using the Grau. If I run up against somebody who's using an XM4 or a UGM that has good aim, I'm gonna get fried. Like, that's just how it is being a Modern Warfare weapon. No fully loaded, it's gonna be a lot slower than these Vanguard options. The buff made it a lot more competitive and definitely one of the better options in the competitive category, but it's not meta. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. Now, the Groza ended up getting a range buff, and the Groza's kind of been a sleeper weapon for a bit. I think it probably belongs in the competitive category. It's not the craziest rifle. I feel like mid-range is really where it thrives, but it is getting better and better over time, so it's definitely made the jump up from just sort of a meh rifle to something you could legitimately use and do well with. Sort of a repeat scenario here, the Vargo S. This thing kind of sucked when it first launched. Like, it was usable for sniper support, but they ended up buffing the long range, the neck multiplier. It's got better control and better magazine capacity now. This thing definitely jumps up into the more competitive area. I still think when it comes to mid-range, we're gonna see dominance from the Cooper and the Nikita and the AS44 and whatnot, but it's better than it was before, certainly. Like, it got a significant buff with the season 5 updates, so certainly worth trying out if you're looking for a new gun to use. Also, surprisingly, the Vargo 52 got another buff, sort of cementing its place as the best non-Vanguard gun in the game. Its ADS is faster now, so that was one of the things that really held it back, and you know, now it's not really holding it back anymore. If you don't like Vanguard guns, the Vargo 52 is your best choice right now. Now, the STG did see some slight nerfs. It got a control nerf, but it also got an ADS buff for what it's worth. It's still super, super easy to use in terms of control. The 760 barrel is what was adjusted there, and it still can absolutely beam players at, you know, long range, medium range, doesn't matter. It and the KG are my, like, number 1 and 2 for true rifles last season, and now I think the KG being down in competitive, very competitive for what it's worth, but being down here, the STG is certainly a better pick. So yeah, I think it stays in top meta for now. Also, because we keep going up at it and I keep looking at it, the NZ has got to get bumped out of this category. The thing is not meta anymore. Clearly we haven't updated the list in a bit here because there hasn't been much weapon tuning as of late, but yeah, that's just not on the level of these other rifles. Now, the UGM got a recoil adjustment. Basically, they changed the recoil pattern, and I am here to tell you that I was using the UGM, I always get the name wrong, a ton after the update, and it's just the best gun in the game still. Like, just straight up, nothing is close to it. It is the number 1 pick by a mile. The STG is good, the Vargo is good, the XM4 and the Farah are good, but then there's the UGM, which is great. Just ask Tony the Tiger, bro. He's out there with his frosted flakes frying everyone. That's just how it is. The UGM is insane. That recoil adjustment did not make the gun worse. Now, surprisingly, a lot of the Marksman rifles got changed. The SVT, which I already think is the best Marksman rifle from Vanguard, ended up getting an ADS buff, but the mags now have worse damage penalties and worse control. I still think it's probably the best Marksman rifle. It's just not going to feel as consistent as it was before, but in terms of a high skill gap weapon, the SVT is up there, and if you're really, really good with it, it can actually just erase players. Now, the M1 Grand got velocity buffs and magazine capacity buffs, but control nerfs. It's still nothing fancy, staying inviolable, usable, but long ways away from being the best option, right? Kind of the same deal with the G43 as well, for what it's worth. Damage buffs, better control and magazine capacity increases, but nothing that I'm going to be super excited to drop in with and be like, oh yeah, you know, I'm going to drop a PR with this thing. It's just nowhere near that level. M1916 also got an ADS buff. This thing is not good at all in terms of realistic competition. So viable for sure if you know what you're doing with it, but definitely not in this area, and certainly not in this area, right? It's kind of a weird one. The MW crossbow got some damage multiplier nerfs. It stays in niche. Even if it got buffs, it'd stay in niche because it's a crossbow, but kind of strange that they nerfed that. I can't complain necessarily because I've been dying to some crossbows lately, I won't lie, but it's annoying to get like one shot down because of the explosive bolt. But yeah, it was nothing crazy before unless you were really, really good with it. It's nothing crazy now either. Also, they nerfed the combat shield speed. That's not changing anything. I'm sorry to anybody who likes to use the combat shield, though. Your turtling days just got a little bit slower. Some of the pistols also got buffed, surprisingly. When I say some, I mean just one. The Clouser got a velocity buff, control and range and movement buffs as well for some of the mags and the barrels. It's still a very awkward firing weapon. It's got a lot of visual kick and bounce back when you shoot, so it's still not something I'd ever want to pick up out of a chest and be like, okay, I can survive with this. I'm probably losing any fight with that thing just because it's so awkward to use. Another one that excites me, the Tundra, jumping from viable up to competitive. There are still no meta snipers for what it's worth, but the Tundra saw some decent buffs as well. It ended up getting better range and damage multipliers and a better ADS, so it just makes it more aggressive, and the one-shot range is now expanded, so that's super, super cool. Definitely makes it a lot more competitive versus the Car, the Swiss, the Pellington, so on and so forth. The Type 99 also saw some changes. The 712 barrel got some buffs, but also some nerfs. Like the multipliers were adjusted with one buff, one nerf, so it sort of canceled each other out. Still a competitive rifle. It can't one shot to the torso anymore, but a decent sniper. The 3-line, which I think is the best sniper in the game, did see a damage nerf to the 20-round mag, but it's still going to be good enough to one shot at any range. It just won't be crazy broken in any sense, like in Iron Trials where it was for a bit. They did stealth nerf that, but it's still, in my opinion, the most consistent Vanguard sniper and probably my favorite long-range sniper in the game right now. Another interesting one here, the combat shotgun. It was really, really good before this update up close. It could like two-shot to full place in close range, like within 8 meters, I think, or so. But they actually ended up nerfing the damage multiplier, and a damage nerf was added into the meta setup as well. So it stays inviolable. It probably could have been competitive before this update had we gone through this list, but right now it's definitely back down to viable after that nerf. Then we get to the SMG category, where we saw quite a few changes. The Armaguerra, which is one of my favorite subs in the game, ended up getting a control, velocity, and movement nerf to the meta setups outside of the fire rate barrel, which is my personal preference on it, so that doesn't really change all that much. It is a slight nerf, but basically they're just balancing out the SMG category to make a lot more things meta and competitive, so it stays being a meta SMG. It's just not as strong as it was before. The TTKs on subs all around got a tad bit worse, which is just good for the balance, right? Marco kind of got the same treatment, damage nerfs, velocity nerfs, and some control nerfs for the barrels, but it's still very fast in general, low recoil as well, consistent, so it stays in top meta, just not as good as it was before, not as dominant as it was before. The Blixen also got some control nerfs, and there's no headshot multiplier on the meta magazine. Still, though, it's a top meta SMG because of its regular properties. It's certainly good enough to stay in this category after the nerf. I was using some last night and still felt very consistent, very fast, and very easy to use. Another one that kind of surprises me, the UGR here got better capacity, which makes it a lot more competitive. I don't think it's a meta SMG, but it's working its way up. You know, one more slight adjustment to the UGR that makes it better, or some serious nerfs to some of these top meta SMGs, and it could find itself in that category. It's definitely a good choice for a non-Vanguard weapon. Oh man, the poor M1928. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know why I have this in competitive. This is not a competitive SMG. Even after the buff that I got in this last update, the Tommy from Vanguard is just not good. It got better control, but worse range for some of the attachments, so it didn't really change all that much. If anything, I got worse for sniper support, and controlling close range isn't the most important thing. This gun, I feel so bad for it. No blueprints, was never meta, probably is never going to be meta. It's just there, it exists and gets no attention. Now, another change that I really like, the PPSH got better range, and there's no damage penalty on the Nambu rounds now. This, in my opinion, hot take, is the #1 SMG. You change over to the Nambu rounds for that better fire rate, insane TTK, no damage penalty, super easy to use, very aggressive and mobile and agile. It's my favorite sub at the moment after using it post updates, and I do think it is the #1 SMG. So, you know, you heard it here first. PPSH, very spicy right now. Surprisingly, the Modern Warfare P90 got a buff. Its medium and long range damage got slightly buffed. Maybe you can make an argument for competitive. I don't think it truly belongs in here. I would still take the MP5s over it. I'd take the AUG and the Bullfrog over it, the MAC-10 over it, the OTS over it. So I can't have it in this category just because there's so many better options, clear better options. But the P90 got some love, and it is now a better choice. Vanguard subs, though, we all know are dominant as can be. Even though we have weapons like the Owen gun and the Whale gun and the Sten in this category, with things like the CX9 and the MP5s and whatnot, they are dominant to a different level because of their attachment capabilities. And that's really just what it comes down to. And then lastly, the Striker 45 Something we really never see mentioned or adjusted, it ended up getting a neck and upper torso multiplier buff. Sort of same deal as the P90, like it makes it slightly better than before, but not enough to make a category jump. It's just decent. Poor UMP also was really never all that good in Warzone, but it's better than it was before. Now, there is one more adjustment I want to make to the list today, and that is bringing the MP40 up into the meta SMG category, because while it was not adjusted specifically in this update, indirectly, because of the nerfs to the Blixen, the Armaguerra, and also the Marco, those are no longer the dominant three. Everything is a lot more balanced, and I think the Armaguerra, the Blixen, the MP40, the PPSH, and also the Marco are like right there with one another. Certain ones have better control, certain ones have better movement, certain ones have a slightly better TTK, but they're very well balanced there. Of course, you also have the Type 100 in there as well with its insane TTK. I still think that's more of a weapon directed towards the top tier of players who can control the recoil well, but if you can use the Type 100 well, you're gonna see serious rewards with it because it's so dominant. But more practically, the Arma, the Blixen, the MP40, the PPSH, and the Marco are looking very, very good right now and very competitive. That said, that is where our current meta stands. As we see more adjustments in the future, we'll obviously be updating this list as necessary, but that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, let me know by dropping a like on it. And if you're new to the channel, feel free to hit that sub button, turn on those post notifications. As mentioned, tomorrow we're breaking down all the best loadouts for the meta weapons and top 10 loadouts for this season. So stay tuned for that. But once again, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, take it easy. Have an awesome rest of your day. And I'll catch you guys later. Peace out.